This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're examining one of the most counterintuitive and psychologically devastating patterns in modern marriage. A pattern that explains why so many good men end up being treated terribly by their wives, why nice husbands get less respect than difficult ones, and why the very virtues that should make a marriage thrive often cause it to slowly die. Marriage is supposed to be a sanctuary, a safe place, a refuge from the chaos and cruelty of the outside world. Two people promise each other, and in many cases promise God, that they will love and support each other forever, no matter what happens. Through good times and bad times. In sickness and health. For richer or poorer. That's a beautiful vision. And for some couples, it actually works that way. But for many, perhaps most modern marriages, something goes catastrophically wrong. What started as love and mutual respect curdles into contempt and dysfunction. What was supposed to be a sanctuary becomes a war zone. Partners who pledged lifelong devotion end up barely tolerating each other's presence or actively despising each other. And here's the specific pattern we need to examine today. How do so many women who married genuinely good men, loving, kind, high-quality men who are trying their best to be good husbands, end up treating those men with absolute contempt in marriage instead of returning the loving kindness they receive? This isn't about women being inherently evil. This isn't about all women or even most women. But there is a specific psychological pattern, a flaw in female relational logic, that causes many women to lose respect for and mistreat exactly the kind of men who deserve respect and good treatment most. Today we're examining the respect paradox, why being too accommodating destroys attraction, the psychological mechanism that causes women to lose respect for men who tolerate poor treatment, the specific pattern where she treats him worse than she'd treat a stranger, why this happens and what it reveals about female psychology, and most importantly, what good men can actually do about this without becoming assholes, but also without continuing to be doormats. This is uncomfortable territory. The truth here challenges both traditional happy wife, happy life advice and modern relationship counseling orthodoxy. But understanding this pattern is essential if you want your marriage to actually work rather than slowly destroying you. Stay with me. This is going to challenge everything you think you know about being a good husband. The pattern, how she treats strangers better than her husband. Let me start by clearly establishing the pattern so we're all observing the same phenomenon. Picture this scenario that plays out in millions of households. A woman has a difficult day at work. Her boss criticized a project she worked hard on. A coworker undermined her in a meeting. Traffic was terrible. She's frustrated, stressed, and emotionally depleted. She walks through her front door and her husband, who loves her, who's been thinking about her all day, who's genuinely concerned about her well-being, notices immediately that something's wrong. So he does what any loving partner would do. He asks what happened. He offers support. He tries to help her feel better. He's being exactly what a good husband should be, attentive, caring, supportive. And she snaps at him, not gently, not apologetically. She's sharp, dismissive, hostile. She treats him like he's the problem, like his concern is annoying, like his attempt to help is intrusive. She treats him worse than she would ever treat a stranger. Now contrast this with how she behaved earlier that same day. When her boss criticized her work, she didn't snap at him. She took it professionally, thanked him for the feedback, and committed to doing better. When the coworker undermined her, she didn't explode. She handled it diplomatically, strategically. When a stranger cut her off in traffic, she didn't chase them down. She let it go and moved on. All day long, she regulated her emotions and treated people with basic courtesy and professionalism. Even people who were actively making her day worse. Even people she doesn't love or care about. But when she gets home to the one person who genuinely cares about her well-being, who has done nothing wrong, who's trying to support her, that's when she unleashes. Why? Because she knows he'll take it. Because she knows he loves her. Because she knows that no matter how poorly she treats him, he'll still be there. He's safe to dump on. He's the emotional punching bag she can't have anywhere else in her life. And here's the truly destructive part. The fact that he accepts this treatment, the fact that he remains kind and supportive despite being treated poorly, doesn't make her grateful or appreciative. It makes her lose respect for him. The dog analogy, why this pattern is so revealing. Let me illustrate this with an analogy that both men and women can immediately understand because it reveals how insane this pattern actually is. Picture a man who's had a terrible day at work. He comes home stressed, frustrated, completely drained, and in his emotional exhaustion, he forgets to show his dog, let's call him Champ, the normal amount of affection and attention. Champ immediately knows something is wrong. Dogs are incredibly attuned to their owner's emotional states. So what does Champ do? He comes over to help make things better. Not because he understands the complexities of workplace stress. But because he loves his owner and senses distress and wants to help, he brings a ball, he nuzzles, he offers his presence as comfort. And what does the man do when he recognizes what's happening? He feels guilty. He realizes he was being selfish, taking out his work frustration on a creature who did nothing to deserve that treatment. He apologizes. "Oh, buddy, I'm sorry." He makes it right. He gives Champ extra attention and affection. Both the man and the dog value the relationship more than the temporary inconvenience of a few emotional moments. The dog didn't hold a grudge. The man didn't justify his poor treatment. They both prioritize maintaining a positive relationship over being right in a moment of stress. Now let's apply that same scenario to a marriage. Woman has terrible day. Husband notices and tries to help. She snaps at him, treating him worse than the man in our example treated his dog. But here's where it gets worse. Unlike the man who immediately recognized his error and made amends, many women will not apologize, justify the poor treatment, "I had a bad day," make it his fault somehow, "You should have known I needed space," continue the poor treatment throughout the evening, hold a grudge if he expresses that her treatment hurt him. A man treats his dog better than many women treat their husbands. And the dog, who has no capacity for complex reasoning, has better relationship instincts than women who claim to be emotionally intelligent. Think about what that reveals. The twisted logic, why she loses respect when he's nice. Let's examine the specific psychological mechanism that causes this dysfunction, because understanding why this happens is essential to knowing what to do about it. Here's what's happening in her mind. And this is going to sound insane because it is insane, but it's also observably consistently true. When she treats him poorly and he responds with kindness, patience, and continued support, she interprets his good behavior as weakness and foolishness. Her internal logic goes like this. I know I'm being a bitch to him right now. I know my behavior is completely unjustified. He didn't do anything wrong. I'm just stressed and taking it out on him. And he's being nice to me anyway. He's still trying to help. He's still being supportive. What kind of fool accepts poor treatment and responds with kindness? A doormat. A weak man. A man without options. A man who doesn't command respect. A man I can treat however I want because he has no standards for how he allows himself to be treated. And if he's that weak, that spineless, that lacking in self-respect, why should I respect him? This is completely backwards from how it should work. In a functional, healthy relationship, when someone treats you with kindness despite your poor behavior, you feel grateful for their patience, guilty about your behavior, motivated to do better, appreciative of their character, increased respect for their maturity. But female psychology, at least in many modern women, doesn't work that way. Instead of appreciation for his virtue, she feels contempt for his weakness. Why? Because on some level, she's testing him, not consciously necessarily, not deliberately. But when she treats him poorly, part of her is asking, will you tolerate this? Do you have standards? Will you hold me accountable? Or are you so desperate to keep me that you'll accept any treatment I give you? And when he accepts poor treatment with continued kindness, he's answered that question. I have no standards. I'll accept anything from you. My love is unconditional to the point of being pathological. You can treat me however you want and I'll still be here. That answer, which should demonstrate his strong character and commitment, instead demonstrates weakness and lack of self-respect in her eyes. And women cannot maintain attraction to or respect for men they perceive as weak. The fundamental misunderstanding, wives versus. The rest of the world hears a question that reveals how twisted this pattern is. Does she really think wives deserve worse treatment than strangers? Because that's functionally what she's claiming when she treats her husband worse than she treats literally everyone else in her life. She treats her boss with respect, even when he's being difficult, because there are consequences for not doing so. She could lose her job, damage her career, create professional problems. She treats her coworkers professionally, even when they're annoying or undermining her, because there are social consequences. Word gets around. Reputation matters. Workplace relationships affect her daily experience. She treats strangers with basic courtesy, even when they're rude or inconsiderate, because there are potential consequences. They might escalate. They might make a scene. There's social pressure to behave civilly in public. But her husband, there are no consequences. He loves her. He's committed. He's not going anywhere. So she treats him worse than she treats people she doesn't even like, because she knows she can get away with it. This reveals something crucial. The problem isn't that she's incapable of emotional regulation or treating people well when she's stressed. She demonstrates that capacity all day long with people who matter less to her. The problem is that she's learned there are no consequences for treating her husband poorly. So he becomes the dumping ground for all the frustration and negativity she regulates everywhere else in her life. He thinks, this is my wife. This is just one bad day out of thousands we'll have together. This is the for worse part of for better or for worse. I love her, so I'll support her through this difficult moment. She thinks, I can treat him however I want and he'll still be nice to me. That makes him a fool, and I can't respect a fool. Both perspectives make sense individually, but they're completely incompatible, and the collision between them destroys marriages. Why this pattern destroys marriages, slowly let me trace how this pattern compounds over time and eventually kills relationships. Stage 1, isolated incidents, months 1 to 12. She has a bad day occasionally and takes it out on him. He responds with patience and support. She doesn't apologize or acknowledge her poor behavior. He thinks this is temporary and not a big deal. She learns that poor treatment has no consequences. Stage 2, pattern establishment, year 1 to 3, the incidents become more frequent. What was once monthly becomes weekly. What was once a bad mood lasting an evening now lasts days. He's walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger her moods. She's normalized treating him as an emotional dumping ground. Stage 3, respect erosion, year 3 to 7. She's lost respect for him because he tolerates her poor treatment. That loss of respect manifests as increased criticism, decreased physical affection, sexual withdrawal, contempt in how she speaks to him and about him, public disrespect. She criticizes him in front of others, comparison to other men who wouldn't tolerate this. He's confused because he's doing everything he was told good husbands do, being patient, supportive, understanding. She's contemptuous because those very behaviors signal weakness to her. Stage 4, relationship death, year 7 plus, 1 of 3 outcomes. Outcome A, he finally reaches his breaking point and leaves or demands massive change, often too late. She's so habituated to poor treatment, and he's so damaged that the relationship can't recover. Outcome B, she leaves because she can't respect him anymore and deserves better. The irony being that her behavior destroyed the very respect she's leaving over. Outcome C, they stay together in mutual misery, him resentful and depleted, her contemptuous and dissatisfied. Neither happy, neither willing to leave, just enduring until death or until one of them finally breaks. This is how good men end up in dead bedrooms, how loving husbands end up resented and disrespected, how marriages that started with genuine love end in bitter dysfunction. And it all traces back to this fundamental pattern. She treats him poorly, he responds with kindness. She loses respect because he tolerates poor treatment. The confrontation solution. What actually works so? What's the solution? Not becoming an asshole, not mirroring her poor behavior, not matching her contempt with contempt. Those strategies just create mutual toxicity. The solution is strategic, firm, immediate confrontation of poor behavior combined with clear boundaries and consistent enforcement. Let me give you the specific framework. Step 1. Identify the pattern immediately. Don't let poor treatment slide. Just this once because she's having a hard day. That's how patterns establish. The first time she treats you poorly for no legitimate reason related to your behavior, you address it. Not hours later, not the next day, immediately. Step 2, call out the specific behavior calmly and directly. Example from our scenario. She comes home from bad day at work, snaps at you when you ask what's wrong. Your response, immediately, calmly, firmly, I understand you had a difficult day, but snapping at me when I'm trying to support you is not acceptable. I'm not your coworker or your boss. I'm your husband, and you will not take your work frustration out on me. This does several critical things. 1, acknowledges her difficult day. You're not being dismissive. 2, clearly identifies the unacceptable behavior, snapping at you. 3, establishes that you're not a target for misdirected frustration. 4, sets a clear boundary about acceptable treatment. 5, does it all without being angry, vindictive, or cruel. Step 3, offer the constructive alternative. Don't just tell her what's unacceptable, tell her what the acceptable alternative is. Continue from above. If you're frustrated about work, I'm happy to listen and help you process it. If you need space to decompress alone first, tell me that directly and I'll give you space. What's not acceptable is treating me poorly because you can't handle work pressure. This gives her a pathway to get what she actually needs, support or space, without treating you like garbage to get it. Step 4, make the consequences. Clear. This is where most men fail. They set boundaries, but don't enforce consequences when boundaries are violated. Continue. If you continue treating me this way, I'll remove myself from the situation. I won't be your emotional punching bag. You can handle your stress like an adult, or you can handle it alone, your choice. Then if she continues, you actually leave, go to another room, go for a walk, leave the house if necessary, make the boundary real through enforcement. Step 5. Maintain consistency of this. Only works if you do it every single time, not just when you're finally fed up. Inconsistent boundaries are worse than no boundaries because they teach her that if she pushes hard enough or long enough, you'll cave. That creates the exact dynamic you're trying to eliminate. Every time she treats you poorly, you address it immediately using this framework. No exceptions, no. I'll let it slide this time. The advanced framework, addressing the root cause of the above, addresses the immediate behavior. But let's go deeper and address what's actually driving this pattern. Here's a more comprehensive confrontation that addresses root cause. This is advanced, but it's what actually creates lasting change. You being rude to me because you can't handle work pressure is not how this relationship is going to function. Here's what I've observed. When things go badly at work, instead of processing that effectively or addressing it where it actually happened, you come home and try to regain your sense of power and control by treating me poorly. That's backwards and destructive. Here's what needs to change. The next time you have a frustrating work situation, instead of trying to restore your pride at my expense, you talk to me about what actually happened so I can help you develop more effective strategies for those situations. This accomplishes several things. 1, you'll be frustrated less often because 2, you'll actually address problems where they start instead of displacing them. 3, the people at work will learn you're not an easy target. And 4, most importantly, you'll stop damaging our relationship by constantly trying to shit where you eat. I understand this is direct and probably feels harsh, but I love you enough to be honest about destructive patterns instead of enabling them, and I respect myself enough to not accept being treated poorly just because I'm safe to dump on. So here's the reality going forward. When you treat me with respect and partnership, you'll get unlimited support, patience, and help. When you treat me like an emotional punching bag, you'll get distance until you're ready to behave like a partner. Your choice. This level of confrontation will shock most women initially, because most men don't have the spine to deliver it. Most men cave to emotional manipulation, to tears, to accusations of being mean or insensitive. But here's what happens when you deliver this kind of confrontation with calm firmness and then actually follow through. She realizes you're not the man she thought you were. You're not a doormat. You're not a fool. You're not desperate for her approval. You have standards for how you allow yourself to be treated, and you'll enforce those standards regardless of emotional manipulation. That realization that you cannot be manipulated, that you will not tolerate poor treatment, that you have self-respect and boundaries, restores the respect she lost, not immediately. Not without testing. She'll test whether you really mean it. She'll push boundaries to see if you'll cave. She'll try emotional manipulation to see if you'll back down. But if you remain consistent, if you calmly, firmly enforce your boundaries every single time without anger but also without wavering, something shifts in how she sees you. You become a man who cannot be walked on. And women cannot help but respect men who cannot be walked on. Why this works? The psychology of female respect. Let me explain the psychology of why this approach works when being nice doesn't. Women are subconsciously, and sometimes consciously, testing men constantly. Not maliciously necessarily, but testing nonetheless. They're asking, are you really as strong as you present yourself? Will you hold frame under pressure? Do you have actual standards, or will you compromise everything to keep me happy? When you tolerate poor treatment with continued niceness, you're failing these tests. You're demonstrating that you don't have standards, that you'll compromise your dignity for peace, that you're more afraid of conflict than committed to self-respect. When you calmly, firmly confront poor treatment and enforce boundaries, you're passing these tests. You're demonstrating you have standards for acceptable treatment. You respect yourself enough to enforce those standards. You're not afraid of her negative emotions. You're not desperate to keep her happy at the cost of your dignity. You're genuinely strong, not just performing strength. Women are attracted to and respect genuine strength, not cruelty, not dominance, not being an asshole, but the strength to have standards and enforce them calmly and consistently. That's what creates and maintains respect. That's what sustains attraction long term. That's what makes her feel safe. Not safe to treat you poorly, but safe in the sense that you're a man who cannot be manipulated or walked on by anyone, which means you can protect and lead. The common objections and why they're wrong. Let me address the predictable objections to this approach. This sounds too harsh, mean, cruel. Is it harsher than accepting years of poor treatment that slowly kills your soul in your marriage? Is it meaner than allowing her to lose all respect for you, which guarantees long-term dysfunction? Honest confrontation delivered calmly is not cruelty. It's the opposite. It's loving her enough to help her see destructive patterns instead of enabling them. My wife would leave me if I talked to her like that. If your wife would leave you for calmly, respectfully setting boundaries about acceptable treatment, Your marriage is already over. You're just pretending it's not. A woman who cannot tolerate her husband having standards for how he's treated is not a partner. She's a parasite. Marriage is about compromise and understanding. Compromise does not mean accepting poor treatment. Understanding her stress does not obligate you to be her emotional punching bag. Healthy compromise is about negotiating preferences, not tolerating abuse. And yes, chronic poor treatment is abusive, even when it's not physical. The Bible says to love your wife as Christ loved the church. Christ also flipped tables and called out sin directly. Love does not equal doormat behavior. Actually, loving someone sometimes means confronting their destructive patterns. Enabling dysfunction is not biblical love. It's cowardice disguised as virtue. This will just create more conflict short term, yes, probably. She's used to treating you however she wants, without consequence. Creating consequences will create pushback. Long term, no. Healthy boundaries actually reduce conflict because they prevent the accumulation of resentment and the escalation of poor treatment. The question is, would you rather have necessary short-term conflict that leads to lasting change, or maintain false peace that slowly destroys your marriage? Final thoughts. The path forward for good men here's. What good men need to understand about this pattern: your kindness, patience, and support are virtues. They should be appreciated. They should create gratitude and reciprocal good treatment. In a healthy relationship with a healthy woman, they do. But many modern women have been conditioned by culture, by feminism, by social media, by terrible relationship advice, to interpret those virtues as weakness. They've been taught that if a man tolerates poor treatment, he deserves poor treatment. You cannot change that conditioning by being nicer. You cannot earn respect by accepting disrespect. You cannot create attraction by being a doormat. What you can do is establish and enforce clear boundaries. This is how I expect to be treated. When you treat me this way, positive behavior, this is what you'll receive in return: support, affection, partnership. When you treat me that way, poor behavior, this is what will happen: distance, consequences, withdrawal of benefits. And then you actually enforce those boundaries consistently. This doesn't make you an asshole. It makes you a man with self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of healthy relationships. Some women will respond well to this. They'll realize they've been taking advantage. They'll appreciate the clarity. They'll rise to meet your standards. Those relationships can be saved and can thrive. Other women will double down. They'll escalate. They'll try harder to manipulate. They'll threaten to leave if you don't go back to accepting poor treatment. Those relationships are already dead. You're just acknowledging it, but either way, you'll know where you stand. And you'll stop wasting your life being treated poorly by someone who's supposed to love you. The choice is yours. Continue accepting poor treatment and watch your marriage slowly die. Or establish boundaries, enforce them consistently, and either restore respect or discover the relationship was never going to work anyway. Both options are difficult, but only one maintains your dignity. Drop a comment about your experience. Have you seen this pattern? Have you tried setting boundaries? What happened? Subscribe, because this channel will continue providing honest analysis of relationship dynamics that actually explains why good men often get treated poorly and what to do about it. Stay strong, stay boundaried, and never accept poor treatment just because you love someone. Real love includes self-respect.